if there's one YouTuber I had to name for you that I used to watch a lot of back in, as a kid from 2014 to 2017, it was for sure Super Mario Logan SML. And in retrospect, should I have been watching him as a kid? Probably not. Like there a lot of the content, Logan's content, it was very, it was not well, it was immature, but more so, it was very, it's not kid friendly at all. They cursed a lot. They fought each other. There was blood. There's all this stuff. Which in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have watched, and especially when they introduced Jeffy into there, like it definitely did not help. It definitely was not geared towards me at all. But even then, I really enjoyed a lot of his content. It was very, all this skits, they were well thought out. They were designed, they were funny. It was edgy, but it wasn't like so edgy that, like, to the point that it got like unbearable, right? That's just how I viewed SML. And and I'm honestly still surprised SML is still going strong, especially after they got sued by Nintendo whatever to like stop using their characters. And I think what made SML really stick out the most was they would have like these characters, right, like Bowser Jr. or Cody. They would have Joseph, right? Is that they would be stereotypical, right? Plenty of their videos they would follow the stereotype, right? Joseph was this spoiled brat, who didn't really care about his friends or anything of that nature, right? Cody was just like a gay dude who was obsessed with his Ken doll, right? Joseph was just this like broke dude who had no money and like his mom is dead, right? That it follows that stereotype for a lot of videos. But I think what Logan did really well with those characters was that we'd have them play the stereotype, but some videos or maybe in some shape or form, right? They would sort of deviate from that stereotype to the point that it almost felt like they weren't even playing out the stereotype, right? They were playing like a whole different character altogether, but it still worked out in the end. And I think you can see that with kids with other like characters they had, Chef PP, Mario, Black Yoshi, which I think he kind of waved him out a bit, but there's all that stuff, right? And initially like Brooklyn Guy or like Mr. Goodman in the earlier days before, like, I would say 2015, 2016, they were sort of like these one-off characters that pop up here and there. But then eventually they sort of built a stereotype for these two characters as well. Brooklyn Guy, he was with the officer, he was the firefighter, he was the doctor. He was like he filled every single job role, right? Mr. Goodman was just like the rich billionaire, right? Who would always ask Mario for his money, and that could cause a plot every single time. That you could. It's like an infinite content glitch, right? And and those were all like their own characters, right? Those are all Logan's characters, and that was all great and all, but then they introduced Jeffy, which was quite literally Logan's own character, and that introduced a whole lot of controversy for Logan. Now Jeffy, I think, was a turning point for SML because that was when their content, ironically enough, got more edgy, and this was around the time I think like the apocalypse was going around when like YouTube was demonetizing a lot of channels, but even then Logan still like had Jeffy play out like these edgy jokes, these dark humor jokes that sometimes could push the line, sometimes they might not push the line. Who really knew? But I think that Jeffy, yeah, it gave Logan a lot of popularity that I assume he didn't expect because you know maybe it might have been a one-off character for him. I don't really know. It didn't seem like it considering how well designed he was. But whether he wanted to be one-off character or not, a lot of people loved Jeffy, and so they wanted him to keep popping up, and he did. And he's, in my opinion, he's probably the most popular character from SML of all time. And it got to a point now, SML, which still exists somehow. They have like the whole like plot hole, right? They have a whole lore behind it, right? Jeffy was abandoned by his mom and his like artist dad. There's all this stuff. There's like a lot of lore in the mansion that they live in, which Logan actually doesn't live in it at all. He just has the character to live in it, but he lives somewhere else. And it really it's crazy to see, right? Because it started off as like in the earlier days they were kind of just like skits. They didn't really have like any like particular plot they're following, right? It was just kind of like, oh, Junior does this, Chef PP does this, Bowser does this, Black Yoshi does this, whatever, right? And then eventually it kind of just like somewhere along the line they sort of made like an actual like plot line with like lore and like history behind it that actually had impact. And for Jeffy in particular, right? It introduced a lot of popularity for Logan, but it also introduced a lot of controversy, right? Because there's been multiple stories of how Jeffy somehow influenced kids to do things they probably shouldn't have been doing. There's one story of like how the mom of a parent, sorry, the mom of a kid, she she got mad at Logan because one of his videos was like dark humor, but then one of the kids actually like followed through with all those dark humor jokes or jokes you could say, and it introduced a lot of controversy for him. And eventually, that controversy got to Logan, to where Nintendo saw this, and they're like, "Hey, like you can't like make these kids with our own characters, right? So either a like just stop YouTube altogether, or b make your own characters, right?" And so what ended up happening, Logan took the obvious route, right? He replaced Mario with Martin. He replaced Rosalina with, whoever, right? Now the characters like Chef BP, Doctor Goodman, Brooklyn Guy, Jeffy, like those were their own original characters. So they were fine, but all the characters like Bowser Jr., Bowser, Black Yoshi, all that stuff, they had to be changed, because like Nintendo just didn't want to deal with that, which I understand, right? Like it's not like a good look to have, like some guy who's playing out dark humor, right, get into a bunch of controversy, and now your company looks bad because of it, right? Like that's just how it is, right? But it really sucks, because what ended up happening was that Super Mario Logan, he had to eventually delete it. Well, actually, there's a lot of shit back and forth, right? So Super Mario Logan got demonetized, right? The original Super Mario Logan. So then they moved to Super Luigi Logan. That also got demonetized. So they switched to Super Bowser Logan. That also got demonetized. And then I think they moved to like Super something Logan, until they were just like, you know what? Let's just delete Super Mario Logan, Super Luigi Logan, Super Bowser Logan, and just start off fresh, start off completely new. And then they have, I think they call it like SML movies or whatever, right? And it really sucks, man, because like it introduced like having, or even like disregarding like the Jeffy, variable, right? It really sucked, because Logan got, he got like a lot of fame, not necessarily like that quick. Like it definitely took years for him to build up his fame, but he definitely has like a lot of fame. He has gained a lot of money from it, right? He has nice cars. He has a daughter. He has all this stuff, right? And it sucks, because like when you have like so much controversy, right? Like how do you deal with that, right? Because no one's really ever expected to have like 10 million subscribers, right? Like 10 million subscribers, that's a huge accomplishment, bro. A million subscribers, even a million subscribers, is like a huge accomplishment too. Imagine you get 10 million subscribers, and you've been doing YouTube for over a decade now, with all this money, all this writing, plot lines and all this stuff, right? It can maybe not get to your head, because I think Logan still has like a good head on his shoulder at the end of the day, but it gets to the point where you're just like, man, like what do I do now? And I think what I heard from a friend was that Logan eventually he wanted to retire, and like, or like once his daughter becomes like a certain age or whatever, like he wants to retire and like take care of his family, which I think is respectable, right? When you have like reputation, right, you want to provide for your family, you want to provide for your parents, all this stuff, right? And that makes sense, right? I think it's respectable for Logan to to consider that, not just think like short term, but also think long term. But I have to wonder, like, what would SML be like actually without Jeffrey, right? Like, imagine if they just continue with Mario, Bowser Jr., Cody, like all those characters. Right? What if they just never had Jeffrey? Like, would SML be as big as it is? Like would it actually be as big as it is right now? Like, who knows, right? And SML is still going really strong. Like, I haven't like, I think the last time, like the last major time I've like watched SML consistently, I would say like 2018, maybe 2019, but I think that was when Logan had to delete all the channels, right? And then I kind of came back like last year and like this year as well. And I see them like they have like 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 a Squid Game series. They have like like, I think like a week or no 2 weeks ago they released a sequel to the Doors video, and I was like, bro, this video was out like ages ago. Like they're doing a sequel of it now, and I was just thinking like, dude, like, I mean, they're still going really strong. Like they haven't had a downfall by any means, bro. They have 10 million subscribers. I'm sure they have like billions of views, making who knows how much money. I'm just thinking like, dude, like, I have to give props to Logan, man. Like even after all the controversy he's faced, all the drama he's faced, getting sued by Nintendo because they didn't want him to use their IPO, all this stuff, right? Like it honestly makes me like, I don't know if proud is the wrong word, because I'm not like like I'm not like close to him by any means, but it makes me like, I guess, look up to him in a sense, because like it shows that he faced like a lot of adversity, right? And he could have easily maybe said maybe like I should just stop here, but he still wants to continue, right? But he just wants to continue with like a new direction, right? He wants to still make like good videos, right? He just, because I'm sure like the quality on his videos, despite having to switch the characters out, they haven't decreased. I'm sure they haven't, right? Like he's been doing this for over a decade now. He's had he has like a bunch of actors helping him out. Like he's a creative guy, right? Like I'm sure his quality hasn't dropped, right? But I think but like he said, he wants to retire at some point. Like provide for his family, provide for his daughter, all that stuff. And I think that if he does pass it on down to someone else, like they can do that as good as him. Or if not, maybe just let SML retire for good, right? And just like let the controversy die off, let the drama die off, and then he can live off in peace. And it kind of makes me wonder, like I did say that like Jeffy, like what would happen if they didn't have Jeffy, but like there were other like other major points as well, right? Like what if they never had Brooklyn Guy, right? What if they never had Chef Pee Pee, right? Because those are integral characters still. They may not be as popular as Jeffy, but they're still integral characters to the SML franchise. And it all started. I don't remember what the skit was, but I think it was like they. I think his first video was like some skit of like he took like a Mario plushie and then he was like role playing, like LARPing out some ad that like had Mario drink some milk, and obviously the quality of it wasn't great. Like it was like 480p, like probably 20 FPS, not great at all. But that drive he had to continue producing content to improve his content, right? It's something I look up to, even though I haven't watched him in years now. Even though like his content. It's not really as appealing to me as it used to be, obviously because I'm a kid. I used to love, just all that good stuff, Jeffy and all that. But yeah, I mean, I think SML. I mean, they're still going strong. I mean, there's really. I mean, Logan's is doing great. They've had multiple SWATs. They've got again lots of drama, and at the end of the day, though, I mean, he's still going. He's still doing good. He's still doing successful despite all the adversity he's faced, and it's something I look up to be honest. So yeah.